All right, hello and welcome to the Rails board meeting. This is Friday, February 21st, 2020. My name is Paul Mills. I am president of the Rails board, and I call this meeting to order at 1:00 p.m. Emily, would you kindly call the roll?
Sure. Dave Berry.
Here.
Sue Busenbark.
Here.
Phil Campbell. Allie Cox. Selena Gomez-Belois. Here. Percy Harris. Diane Hollis. Sarah McComb-Chase.
Here.
Paul Mills. Jenna Nemec-Reese.
Here.
Scott Ron. Nadia Sheikh.
Here.
Thomas Stagg.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Emily. All right, we're going to do a recognition of guests and announcements and also public comments at the same time. So why don't we start here with guests in Burr Ridge? I'm looking at you, Wes.
Wesley Smith, Rails.
Miguel Figueroa, American Library Association.
Quincy George Rails.
Grant Halter, Rails.
Mark Hatch, Rails.
Dan Bottom from Rails.
Jim Krieger, Rails.
Ann Slaughter Rails.
Mary Witt Rails.
Emily Feister, Rails.
Monica Harris Rails.
Deirdre Brennan, Rails.
All right, any public comment here in Burr Ridge? If not, Nadia, do you have any, public comment in your with you there, or any guests?
In my bedroom? No, I don't.
Well, for OMA, we need to be thorough. So
I have a 5-year-old that has the flu. She counts.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, if the 5-year-old has anything to say, now's the opportunity. But all right, East Peoria. Do we have any guests?
It's Kendall.
I see Kendall.
Hi, Kendall.
We see him, but I don't think he's unmuted.
Well, all right. You know what?
Wave at us.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, it's James.
James.
Hello, sorry, I was just turning it on. I think Kendall is supposed to be here because his stuff's here. We must not have anybody here yet. Robert is here. Everything was off, so I just turned it on and put on the connection, so I should have danced or something for you all.
What, while you're here, do you have any public comment?
No.
Oh, no. All right. Well, thank you, though. Let's move on to let's move on to Springfield. Hello, Springfield.
Hello, we're here.
Good. Please introduce.
This is Joe Natale in Springfield. I'll be here while Greg's in another meeting.
Sure.
He'll be back by 2:15.
Okay. Any public comment in Springfield while we're looking at you?
No.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bolingbrook and Coal Valley. Looks like there is no one present. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to announce themselves? Any public comment on Zoom? All right. Sounds like we are good there. We are moving on to the adoption of the agenda, and actually something Joe mentioned. Greg is going to be delayed a bit, so we do have the Illinois State Library report as item 7.4. With the board's gracious approval, we will adjust when Greg can actually speak to us to time it when he's actually able to speak to us. So we might need to come back to him a little bit later in the agenda. So with that, may I have a motion and a second for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Sarah. And Dave is a second. Any comments, corrections to the agenda? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Next, we have our approval of our board minutes, the financial reports, and expenditures. First up, we have the Rails board minutes from January 17th, 2020, our regular meeting. That was included in the online packet. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for that meeting as submitted?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. Second. Dave. All right. So we have a first move and a second. Any corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Well, we are moving right along. Hello, Percy. Good to see you, sir. We are actually just on the financial report. You're just in time to hear Jim speak, which is always a highlight for us all. So please, Jim, if you would kindly come up.
Happy to. Good afternoon. We have the financial report for through the 7 months ended January 31st, 2020. It's not too much has changed. We did get some extra area per capita grant payment of $1,614,386 in early January. Our coverage now of our operations is up to 18.5 months. We've received all the funding for fiscal year 2019 now and 35.6% of the fiscal year 2020. And all but one voucher for the remainder of the fiscal year is in the comptroller system. When it comes out as a payment we don't know, but we will keep you posted. But the payment history is generally, as I pointed out last month, has moved up about 2 months from the prior year. Our revenues through January were $863,000 above budget in the general fund. It's all from higher area per capita grant revenues. Investment income is now unfavorable to budget, but due to a decline in rates from January, but rates are now holding pretty steady, so we shouldn't be too bad now for the rest of the year. Our expenditures are $544,000 below budget, mostly due to lower contractual services, which includes the expenditures for catalog membership grant applications. We received no applications on the November period, so no money has gone out, and the next due date is April 1st, and we expect a few applications. But we probably will be well short of the $320,000 that we had budgeted for this item this year. And the personnel costs are lower due to previous vacancies, which have all been filled. So going forward, we should be approximating budget. And our special revenue fund activity, we're now pretty much in full swing on the census project and the L2 replacement project, but all that is now in the budget. We have received all the funding for the market quality and the L2 grant, and the funding for the census project will be on a month-to-month basis. We have submitted our first payment request. When it gets paid, we're still watching. We haven't received anything yet. Other than that, are there any questions or operations?
Any questions for Jim?
So I move on to the expenditures.
Please.
The expenditure listing is at the end of the report. It totals for the month $1,401,313.26. It's a bit higher than normal because we made our quarterly, partly because we made our quarterly LSAP support payments, which were $320,000. Do we have any questions on the detail?
Any questions for Jim? If not, may I have a motion for approval of the check voucher register for January of 2020?
So moved.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you. Yes, thank you, Hallie. Any further questions about the detail? If not, Emily, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Dave Perry.
Yes.
Sue Bustenbark.
Yes.
Ellie Cox. Yes. Gwen Gregory.
Yes.
Percy Harris.
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase.
Yes.
Paul Mills.
Yes.
Jenna Namek-Luisi.
Yes.
Scott Pointon.
Yes.
Nadia Shake.
Yes.
Thomas Stack.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we're already down to reports, which is always exciting. Report from the Rails Board President, which happens to be me. The only item two things I'd like to say. One, I was fortunate enough to attend the ILA legislative meetup this morning, which was wonderful. Rails was was represented, and I think an opportunity to discuss not only local library needs with our legislators, but actually Deirdre and I were talking to an opportunity to talk to what Rails has done for a local member, which I think was really, really wonderful. We can sometimes not be as visible as I think we need to be in the services we provide to our state. So that was wonderful. The other thing I would like to discuss, you may recall earlier this fiscal year, we discussed about having more conversations with our partner regional library system, the Illinois Heartland Library System. Their board will be discussing it at their meeting next week. Deirdre, is that correct? Their meeting?
Yes,
I think
Tuesday.
Tuesday, yes. So, you may recall Deirdre and I had a really productive conversation with their executive director and their board president at ILA. And I'm hoping after the meeting next week, we might find some opportunities for more communication and collaboration between our two systems. So, anything you'd like to add to that, Deirdre?
Nope.
Okay, so that is my report. We move on to the advocacy advocacy committee.
I can say a few
Please.
words on behalf of Michael, who is in Dubai, where it's really warm. He was at the Buffalo Grove Legislative Breakfast, and as was I. And I don't know if you saw his Facebook page, but on Library Lovers Day, which just happened to be coincidentally Valentine's Day, he brought donuts to the libraries that surround his library, and he was received very favorably, yes. Several members of the advocacy committee were at the legislative meetup this morning also. Percy and Sarah, and I don't know if anybody else was, but anyway, so thank you for doing that, because I know it's
Which one was this morning?
Tinley Park. Sarah told me that she saw roads that she never knew existed before.
It's true.
Yep.
I saw a portion of the state today that I've never seen.
So I think there's a meeting scheduled next month. Advocacy, I mean. Yeah.
Thank you, Deirdre. Consortia committee has not met since our board last met. Executive committee has not met. So we're moving right along here. Glenn, anything from policy committee?
The policy committee has not met.
Well, all right. Deirdre, we come back to you with the resource sharing committee.
They're meeting in March.
Meeting in March, all right. And that just leaves universal service.
We have not met. I've got, you want me to read the email that?
Yeah.
Okay. Dee wrote to me, I think it would be best to hold the report until March. Not as much has gotten done as I had hoped. Waiting on ISL for action on the different types of non-resident cards. And we do have a new member.
Yes, Gail Bush has joined our committee.
Yes.
She was at the legislative breakfast the other day also. It was a
wonderful.
very busy legislative breakfast, and she was on the board when Rails was formed, for those of you who may or may not know that. And she is probably about as passionate about universal service as I am. And she is currently on the board of the Oakton Community College. And so community colleges often come up as a possible partial solution to the universal unserved, however you want to call it, issue, because community colleges have libraries that do serve all residents of the state. So she is interested as a resident of Illinois, as a librarian, as a member of a community college board, and she's a real doer. I think everybody would attest to that who knows her. So I'm really glad about that.
Actually, that is a good report.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, as we continue our reports, we move on to the Rails monthly report. And Deirdre, that happens to be you.
That does happen to be me. Thank you. Let's see. Well, you saw the video. It's getting lots of play. Nick Offerman retweeted it on his Twitter, and it's like hundreds of thousands of views. This morning, Mary got an email, right, or yesterday, Mary got an email from somebody in Plattsburgh, New York, who wants to get the, whatever file it would be that she would need to have, because she wants her local theater to show it.
Oh,
So it's really, really quite, it's making quite an impact, so that's great. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, yeah, I wanted to say, just reiterate, went out to Forreston a few weeks ago, and it was really rewarding, because there's a very small library, and they really, they've had a lot of issues, as libraries do, unfortunately, and so I was able to talk to them about how to search for a new director. They have 1.5 employees, the director, who is not full-time, and then a part-time employee who works at the desk, a woman named Mary, who is now the interim, and she is also the custodian. And their annual budget is $40,000 a year. So this is just, to remind those of us who, it's all too easy to forget that there are so many different sizes and shapes of libraries, and they're all trying to do their best, for their communities. So they were very grateful to hear about some of the Rails resources. She wrote back to me a week or so later to say that they've already looked at some of our trustee training materials, which is really great. And I also put her in touch with Carolyn Coulter, who is the director of Prairie Cat, because they're a member of Prairie Cat. And Carolyn's going to go there with some of her staff, I think, and see if they can help. They have a lot of donated books, and a lot of them shouldn't be cataloged, so I think that we have a vested interest in helping to figure out which of those books should not be put into the Prairie Cat catalog, is what we all kind of decided. So anyway, that was really, it was really a good thing to do. And I was really also glad because I didn't hit any deer when I was, driving that night, because if I had, I would have been in big trouble. Let's see, Find More has 40 member libraries now, which is, I think, really, really awesome. Inky is continuing to grow in popularity. We are beginning to have some, related to eRead Illinois and Access 360, we are starting to have some serious conversations about looking at other vendors, because the Baker and Taylor app just isn't where it should be. So we'll keep you all informed. That's a huge decision if we end up making it. But the main thing is that the tax dollars that we, put, and the libraries put towards eRead are, put to the best possible use. So we have to, it's our responsibility to look into that, so we're going to. I guess, well, when we talk about the budget, because we're going to talk about the budget, because it's something good to talk about, we can talk about the school libraries and the public libraries. And so I guess I will stop there and ask if anybody has any questions.
Deirdre, I did have a question regarding eRead.
Yep.
Are there any, I know you mentioned at one point there's a possibility that if things don't improve, Rails may go out to RFP for that. Is there anyone else besides the obvious choices for that? I think there's, Bibliotheca's Cloud Library, there's Overdrive. Is there any other vendor out there capable of doing that service?
No, I don't think so.
It is just the other two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is, I will say from our library's perspective with our patrons, the eRead app is a barrier to usage.
Yes, and that is not the way it should be. Right, we know that, and we've worked with them, and, they have been a good partner in many ways, but at a certain point, enough's enough. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens. It's a big project because you have to move the titles over. But it can be done, so.
I am glad you're looking at that. Yeah.
Yep.
Any questions for Deirdre about her monthly report? Always appreciate it, ma'am.
Of course.
We move on to our next report. We have Service of the Month. Wishly Member Engagement, and Dan Bostrom. Well, Dan, if you're kind enough to come up here, sir.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for having me. Okay, so yeah, you all should have a board document kind of describing some of the things that that I do, but that we do here at Rails. My mom really likes to make fun of me because she doesn't understand the word engagement. She kind of thinks it's like a buzzword, sort of like synergy or scalable or something like that. So it's difficult to understand what it is, but I kind of like to think of it as like partly customer service, partly sales, some relationship building, some communications to it a little bit as well. So when I came to Rails about 2 years ago, I kind of figured out that we have some challenges just in terms of geography and the different types of libraries. There's a lot of different libraries with different missions, different focuses. There's even some differences in changing the roles that people do in their library. So part of what we try to do is create a strategy to address things that are like flexible, but at the same time that we're getting the message across that we're all part of one organization. So that board document really kind of speaks to that. You can see that I've tried to, there's really 4 tactics in there. 2 of them are face-to-face, 2 of them are basically online. So when we do planning on a 6-month calendar, summer and winter. Right now we're in the middle of a winter calendar. So when we do that, we kind of figure out how many site visits do we want to do, how many online roundtables do we do, how many member meetups, that kind of thing. What topics are we hitting? What schools are we hitting? What other types of different types of libraries out there are we hitting? Really, site visits are the core of what we do. And Deirdre talked about visiting the Forreston Library. I mean, there's so much goodwill in doing those site visits that it really is a really big thing for us. We request probably 95% of those visits, so it's us driving the agenda. We send them a survey. We're taking notes during the meetings. We'll send them, follow up with everything that we talked about. We learn a lot from our libraries. It's not just all pushing things on them. It's there's an element of serendipity, being able to see the library, kind of learn about it. It's always a fun thing, and the libraries really do generally love it. The online member visits. So we realized we need to be flexible with those. Sometimes visiting people in person is just not going to work out. We have to be a little bit nimble, so those site visits are kind of like a rapid response tool. We found a little bit, if someone's really desperate for us to come talk to them about what's going on in their library or what we can offer, that's a really good option. We've also kind of created some variations in that online visit. So you see we have like a new directors one that's like, it's fairly soon after they join the library as like a public or, or academic library director. We can connect with them on a one-to-one basis. We're talking, we're kind of exploring the website together. That's a nice thing to offer. And then school library tune-ups, those are great to do, especially like at the beginning of the year where you might have a new school librarian who has no idea what Rails is. So that's those are great. And we always, we see a lot of value in being able to do that, again, quickly and effectively. Member meetups, these are another face-to-face approach. And I like to say that there's 3 benefits to these. We get to meet a lot of different people in one room. That's one of the really nice things. Those people get to learn a lot about Rails, so we're kind of teaching them about what we have to offer. And then the biggest one is those people get to meet each other, and they're learning that Rails is not just a collection of libraries, it's a community, and that there's ways that they can support one another. You can see from this the stats that we didn't do a ton of those last year. A big reason for that is we're doing more online things. We're approaching it differently. So the online roundtables, those are brand new as of last year. With Zoom, it's so easy to bring together people around one topic, and we've really found that those are fun to do. They're low pressure. You just need to sign on for an hour to join up. People can hear what's going on, like in Quincy or Rockford or across the state. We're doing those on My Library Is topics. That's a big thing for us. We've done 2, and we're going to do 2 more coming up this spring, so those are awesome. What's not on that document is all the things we're doing with our partner organizations. So obviously ILA is the big one. We do a ton of things with ILA. Anne and Joe are both on the board. We have a lot of connections within ILA. But we also have really great relationships with the other type-specific organizations in Rails. So IACRL is the Academic Library Forum of ILA, and we've been trying to partner with them. Actually, we have a great event coming up in May called Spark, which is going to be down in Bloomington, down at ISU. We've done a lot of networking with the Special Library Association Illinois chapter. We had events at Caterpillar and John Deere, and we're probably going to do another one this summer, sort of like that. And then obviously, you saw from Deirdre's report, we're doing a ton with ISLE right now, and we're having great discussions. So I think we're all out there trying to do the best we can to create a better community for everyone. Yeah, is there any questions? Can I answer anything for anyone?
Do you have any new, different things that you're looking at doing that you want to do?
Well, yeah, we're kind of doing some fun things with, this Spark event that we're doing at ISU, the ICRL, which is the Illinois Association of College and Research Libraries. You know this. Who am I talking to? But they used to have, their own every other year conference, and they don't have that anymore, and they've wanted to find ways to gather together. So what we're doing is like a peer-to-peer networking / continuing education event. It's going to be like lightning talks, more or less, a full day of lightning talks, and then there will also be like time for networking in the middle. So it's May 15th, I believe, Friday, May 15th at ISU. Registration's open. We're looking for proposals if you have them, so please do submit those.
We extended that deadline too, by the way, so that we can get more proposals.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So yeah, that's cool. That's a cool thing that we're doing. SLA is undergoing a lot of changes right now, so we haven't been as innovative with them as much as we can. But and then I think you're going to see some cool things come out of this ISLE collaboration. I can't tell you what, but I think that there's going to be some fun things. So good question.
Great.
Yes, Jenna.
Just a testimonial as someone who last September hosted a site visit. Dan came to my school library as we were planning to reopen it after it being 8 months closed for remodeling. It was really great to have Dan and tour him through this space and kind of share with him some of my successes and challenges. And what I really valued is as a newish board member to Rails and also as a newish school librarian at my particular site, it was really great to have Dan there and not have it be a one-size-fits-all thing, like here's what Rails offers everybody. He was able to say, based on what you're telling me, here's what Rails can offer to you. And that level of personalized service was really wonderful, and I would highly recommend that anyone take advantage of having Dan at their library to have the same, what I know would be an excellent experience. So thank Dan.
Thank you, Jenna. It helps when you've known somebody for 10 years and they live 3 houses down from you.
Yeah. I noticed I didn't mention that part. I'd say that anyway.
Dan, thank you for the network meetups, because those are
Thank you for
really
attending.
fun to go to. And,
Yeah.
You get to meet a lot of librarians and that, and get a lot more information. It's very informational.
Yeah.
They're really fun to go to.
Yeah, you never know who's going to show up. That's what's fun. And they are a good way to just, it's low pressure. It's a good way to just get people comfortable with each other and learning about what's happening.
I think they've been really helpful with the census,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's really helped the members because there's so much information that's being pushed out and shared, and those online groups are a great way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, well, it is only 1:29, so we will come back to the Illinois State Library Report when Greg is able to join us. Joe, thank you for being there in the meantime. We are moving on to new business with our L2R project update, and Miss Ann Slaughter will be providing that. Ann, you'd kindly join us?
Indeed, thank you. So Jim mentioned the L2 grant in the financial report, so I'm going to fill you in on what the project is all about. So for some background on what L2 is, for those of you who might not be as familiar. It is a platform that provides a continuing education calendar and also like meeting room reservation calendar, as well as a directory of all libraries in Illinois. So it's used statewide by library staff. We hope that every staff member at every library has an account. And also heavily every day by system staff and state library staff. So it's an important tool. It was originally developed in 2008 as a collaborative project between what was at the time 9 library systems, and it was funded by the state library. And Rails has housed it since about 2010. At the time of the merger, we took the servers and the maintenance of said platform and servers from the North Suburban Library System. So we've been housing it since then. And in about 2015, Brian Smith came to me and said, we need to replace L2. It's not super secure. We're reaching the limits of its flexibility in terms of how we can make changes to the software based on needs that evolve. And the interface is not at all modern, which is kind of an understatement. So we had that conversation, and then promptly the budget impasse started. So we bided our time for about 2 years. During that time, we did have kind of a summit with Heartland, Rails, and State Library representatives to kind of build the foundation for this project. Getting on the same page about what our needs are, how we're all using it, what we rely on it for. So what we're going for is to certainly upgrade the design as well as the security, retaining what we count on it to do, and then make it more flexible so that we can more easily respond to those changing needs. So thus far, we have secured funding. We got the state library on board. They're very supportive of the project. They want to see it succeed, and they have awarded us an additional grant, as you know, to accomplish the project. So once the grant period started, which was almost 13 months ago now, we started in our project planning, planned a series of town hall meetings across the state. So we met with system and state library representatives, as well as representatives from various member-led groups across the state, continuing education and kind of ad hoc networking groups, to gather needs. In the process, engaging our stakeholders through, what will require their engagement throughout the project up through go live. And then we used the information that we gathered to put together and then issue an RFP to seek a vendor to do the development and design work. So we chose Atten Design Group out of Denver. They were absolutely thrilled with our decision so far. They've been great to work with. They work exclusively with nonprofit, government, and other mission-driven organizations, and they have a great starting point in a product that they've developed called Intercept, which was a Knight Foundation grant-funded project that they did with the Richland Public Library in South Carolina to develop a library event and meeting room calendar. So that's a great starting point for us. We have a lot of really complex needs, so any work that has already been done saves us a lot of money. And they're really excited to develop this particular product and to work on the whole project with us. Throughout all of this time, we've had a core team of staff that I'm going to acknowledge in more detail in a minute, doing all the planning and working with our vendor, who's doing a lot of work, but that's only a piece of the project. There's a heavy load on Rails staff as well as some of our partner staff in terms of identifying exactly how each little detail needs to function, as well as the things that our vendor can't do for us, like plan training and continuing to engage our stakeholders and identify what people are going to need and how we communicate that to them. So we continue to work closely with the state library as well as Heartland, because it's something that we all rely on. This is a project that we're shepherding, but it's on behalf of the entire state. It truly is a statewide platform. So currently with Atten, they're working on design, and migration planning. They're about to start development. Their process is really interesting. We have, and fantastic. We've engaged in a highly detailed planning process so that by the time they start development, the goal is to not really have any open questions or to rule out as many open questions as possible so they know exactly what they're doing and how we need it to look so they can just kind of shoot ahead, which is great because we have a pretty tight timeline. We're looking at a go live in late summer of this calendar year, which will allow us to work out kind of the post go live kinks that we expect to happen anytime you release a project like this, and then immediately start planning for the annual library certification process, which in 2021 will happen via L2 for the first time. That's a really exciting aspect of the project that actually got added on a little later. We heard from a lot of our members that anything that we could do to streamline the many various data collection responsibilities that they have, data provision responsibilities that they have, they would appreciate. So we talked to the state library about what the opportunities might be there, and they agreed that certification, they'd be happy to have us take that into L2, and we see it as a great starting point for hopefully further integrations with other requirements. So we have an outstanding team of Rails staff working on the project. We are meeting more than weekly at this point. Sometimes the whole team, sometimes other people, and we're of course bringing in other kind of subject matter experts as needed. But the core team is myself, as well as Brian Smith, Wes Smith, Wayne Dixon, Grant Halter, and Jody Rubel, and each one of them is essential and doing amazing work. So, you know, we couldn't be doing it without any of them. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and also invite you to, if you're a library director, to please make sure that your data in L2 is updated and your staff lists are current. And keep watching e-news and other communication mechanisms for further news.
Any questions for Anne?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of work.
It's a great project. It speaks well to regional library systems. Regional library systems were, you know, the creators of the original L2. I was in that meeting room when it was born, and it's, you know, the next generation is also being, you know, born in the regional library system. So again, that speaks well for us.
Yep.
All right. Well, we are moving on to 8.2, a cataloging services update. Nancy, would you? Yes. Or do you need the laptop? Or you don't have to come up here if you need the laptop.
Yeah, I have.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for having me. And first, I would like to talk a little bit about why cataloging is important and why cataloging training is important. I hope many of you know that cataloging is one of the foundations of librarianship. And cataloging librarians provide critical and valuable services to our users. So that is access to information. Information resources are useless if we are not providing the access. So we all know that. So cataloging plays a important role for the success of our library operations. So when we have well-trained catalogers create careful, complete catalog records that will enable a reliable search experience for our users, and so that they can discover their materials easily. I believe that cataloging is kind of a customer service, even though most of the time they are not noticeable by our users, because through their work to thousands of users who use library catalogs and databases on a daily basis, as well as they are supporting future library users as well. So nowadays, cataloging is no longer knowing every card in the library catalogs. Everyone knows that. So, and the cataloging field is changing so rapidly, and new concepts and models are, and discovery products are starting to change how libraries provide access to their collections. Therefore, it is critical for cataloging staff to continually develop their skills because the decisions they are making at their work can enhance or obscure access to those resources. So catalogers need to know various tools, resources, standards, so that they can catalog the materials efficiently and effectively. So through our previous surveys and through cataloging services work group, Rails identified the need for cataloging training courses to staff throughout Rails libraries. So we are providing free cataloging training to all our members. So now I wanted to give you some of the highlights from cataloging trainings we had recently. So I am happy to say that we are definitely meeting the demands we identified in previous surveys and by the cataloging working group. We designed and developed 2 cataloging training curricula. First one is cataloging basics, which has 3 modules, and the second one is classification and subject analysis basics, which has 2 modules. These courses provide a strong foundation for newer catalogers, as well as great refresher for experienced catalogers. Excuse me. We designed and created these courses with the lesson plans, handouts, exercises, lecture slides, and pre-course materials, also post-course materials as well, to meet the needs of different types of learners. During September and October 2019, we offered these 2 training as a pilot. Since this was a pilot, we did not even market this course. We just sent out an email through our tech services emailing list. But these courses were in high demand, and it was filled very fast. And there were more than 10 people were on waiting list on each courses. Wow. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And a total of 22 Rails members attended those training, and we did 24 hours of training in 4 days. Wow. Each courses were offered as a 2-day in-person training. And we received great feedback from participants about all of the courses. 99% of the participants mentioned that they exceeded their expectations. So the pilot training was a great success. So during January and February 2020, we had our first official training. Yesterday was our recent training was yesterday. So these classes were filling very fast as well, and with a waiting list. In addition, there are people emailing me and asking me if they can find a spot. So it is very clear that, yeah, it is, these trainings are in great need. So during the pilot, majority of the participants are from public libraries, but this time we had participants from academic, also from school libraries. This time we had a total of 32 Rails members attended, and we did a total of 24 hours of trainings. And we received a great feedback this time also. So our next step is Rails will continue offering this training quarterly in different service areas of Rails. Now we already scheduled the courses in L2 until November 2020. So in March and April, we will have a training in East Peoria. Also in July and August, we will have another session in Burridge. Also in October and November, the training will be in Call Valley. We are also planning to expand our cataloging training. We will offer advanced and supplementary training opportunities in specialized cataloging courses. We are also adjusting the content of some of the courses based on our feedback and based on the developments in the field. Currently, I am designing another course, another foundation course, so we are planning to offer that course as well. That is mainly the training part. So now I would like to talk a little bit about what other cataloging services from Rails. Other than training, we are planning to expand our cataloging services. Currently, we invest in possibilities of special cataloging support to our member libraries, such as original and world language cataloging, needs of our members. We are working on a survey right now to determine those special needs. We are planning to send out the survey soon, so you will see that soon, so we can identify the unmet cataloging needs of our members. I am also attending different cataloging meetings in different consortia to identify their cataloging needs and get them informed about the cataloging services from Rails. So these are the main highlights. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer.
Well, so this is great, and as someone that works in this general area, I know that it is definitely, people working in cataloging always would like more training, and it is a very complicated area that it's not something you learn overnight. So it's great that this is available. And I hope that more academic libraries will take advantage of it, and I'm trying to publicize it to them.
Thank you.
I could even possibly offer that we could host it at my institution in the future sometime if we wanted to. It might make it easier for some people from the, like, inside Chicago to attend.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah,
we could
definitely.
look into that. We can talk about that.
Thank
Of course,
you,
then
Gwen.
people from my library could easily attend it.
If you host it at an academic library, I think that it will show other academic libraries, oh,
Yeah.
there's this thing that we could also attend.
Mhm.
Maybe sometimes academic libraries, I think, don't think of that as being something
Right.
for them. They think they
Right.
have to do it some sort of special way.
Yeah, so we could, and so I do think that it is a really good thing, and I hope, if I can facilitate providing input from academic libraries, I would certainly be happy to do that in any
Yeah.
way, because I think we all, even though I work at a large academic library, we often feel like, well, we could do better at this, at cataloging too. So
Mhm.
everyone needs some help
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely.
And I'm really glad that Rails is doing that. Now, I don't know if you have, like, talked with people at Carly or in.
I haven't talked to them yet from Carly.
I don't know what the best way to do that is, except there's, like, Carly has a lot of tech services people in academic libraries are really hooked into Carly stuff because that's what they have to work with a lot. So that is another, and I could help facilitate, like, announcing
Yeah.
things in the Carly newsletter or the Carly Tech Services listserv and things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's filling fast, and there is a waiting list for March and April. It's already there, and there is a waiting list for that.
But if you want, like, if you're doing a survey and you want it announced there to get
Oh, yeah.
people to respond, I could, that's,
Yeah, I would like to.
okay, sure, just let me know.
All right, I will.
They have a technical services committee.
They
But
do,
you-
in fact,
yeah.
one of my colleagues is on it.
I see that now, yeah. So their liaisons are Jennifer, I don't know how to pronounce it, Jennifer. Mascadrelli and Nicole Swanson. So,
Yeah, so sometime, we might be able to hook up for you to meet the Carly people, to
Yeah.
talk to them. Although Carly's very busy right now with the whole Alma transition, so
Mhm.
later this year might be better.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
With the waiting list, is there, excuse me, are there plans in the future to accommodate the people that are on the waiting list to be able to?
No, they have to, because their situations may change, so we don't know. We cannot predict that, so they have to re-register for the classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to clone Nancy, I think.
For sure.
Cut it off, huh?
Yeah, when Nancy humbly says "we," she means her.
I think it's great. It's a great option for school libraries too, especially since most schools only, it's a
Yeah,
one-person
one-person
project.
project, yeah.
And so rather than maybe in other libraries where there is a dedicated cataloging department or a dedicated cataloger,
Yeah.
in school libraries, we're the ones who do all
Yeah,
the
all the
things.
things.
So it would be I don't know if, and I know that there are so many things on your plate, and I really admire all the work that you're doing, but if there could ever be maybe a specialized training that could be done just for
Just for
school
school?
librarians.
I can put that in my list, but
I think
not soon.
No,
Yeah.
no, and I'm not saying soon, but I do think that it would be something that would be tremendously valuable, because as someone who's in the middle of a huge reclassification project right now, a number of years ago, my school library collection was migrated onto a non-standard classification system, and now we are migrating it. I actually have a 14-person project team at my library right now, working on converting everything back to Dewey.
That's a lot.
My head hurt.
It makes my head hurt too. It's something that we really do value, but we don't always have the time to spend as much as we would like to on it. So if there's a way for us to be able to say, here's how you can prioritize that cataloging with the limited time that you have, even something like that would be amazing.
Yeah, I would love to, but I have to figure out how.
I get it. And if there's any way I can help, I would be pleased to do that.
Okay, definitely.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anyone have any questions for Nancy? Thank you, ma'am. We actually just noticed that we think we've lost Nadia. 'Cause we don't see her on the screen anymore.
She's there, she just has her video turned off. Kids might be attacked.
Okay, no, then that's, all right, that's fine.
I'm here.
All right, Nadia, all right. All right. We didn't want to lose you, so, all right, good. Okay, well, we are moving on then to 8.3, membership changes, and we're gonna ask Dan to come back up here.
I'm glad to come back because I forgot my water bottle from the first time. Okay, so Midwestern Career College. This institution is mostly associate's degrees, especially in the healthcare field. And I was really fortunate. I met this woman, the librarian, Aaliyah, at the Illinois Library Association conference. She actually attended a panel that was on the My Library Is topic. And we got to talking, and she didn't realize that Rails, she knew about Rails, she didn't realize that she could join. And so we had a long conversation, and then so she just submitted an application about 2 weeks ago. And I went and did a site visit about a week ago, and they have a very small library. You can see from their holdings that this is a very small library, but it is a functioning library, and people can check out books from them. They have an online catalog. They have ProQuest, but they're really interested in, she's really interested in getting support for continuing education. She was at the Illinois Library Association. She didn't realize that she could attend free webinars through Rails as a member. Deals and discounts, things like that. We did talk about eRead, or possibly joining that. So we had a good conversation, and this is Midwestern Career College. So can I answer any questions from you all about this? Yes,
So is this just for one campus of this, where she is, or?
So this is an agency, which means the whole organization would join, and all of those libraries would join along with.
Okay, but so the holdings is just for this one library, or is that for all the libraries?
I think that's for all the libraries. Yeah.
So that's just print holdings, because it then.
Yes, there is audio visual as well, and that's not included. That's not included in the 740.
Okay. But sometimes, like for academic libraries, sometimes like more important what you have electronic resources to access to than things like what you have. So where is it located?
It's in downtown Chicago. It's on Wacker Drive, basically right across from Union Station. Across the river from Union Station, and then they have 4 other locations: one in Naperville, one in Skokie, one in Blue Island, and one in the South Loop, sort of. The director, the library director, Aaliyah, she worked for the Blue Island Public Library a number of years ago, and knew about Rails from there, so she's familiar with the organization.
I should have looked this up. Is it like a independent, or is it owned by some other corporation?
For-profit institution.
But is it owned by some other for-profit?
I can't tell you the corporate structure. I don't know the corporate structure. Yeah.
I'll look it up.
I think it is, but I couldn't tell you what that looks like.
Okay.
Sorry. Other questions?
Any other questions for Dan? Well, if not, may I have a motion to recommend to the Illinois State Library approval of Midwestern Career College as a new Rails member?
So moved.
Thank you, Dave.
Second?
Thank you, Jenna. Any further comments? Any questions for Dan while we have Dan here? He does have his water bottle, so he might not come back. All right. If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that recommendation will go on to the Illinois State Library. Thank you, Dan. Moving right along, we are down to 8.4, appointment of a nominating committee. It is February, everyone, and our fiscal year is, we are if I'm doing my math right, we are 2/3 done. So, Deirdre, would you like to speak, please?
Sure, yes, so you see, so the nominating committee, I've done some work on behalf of Paul to get some members, so we do, so just so you know whose terms are up this year. So Dave Barry, his term, and Dave, believe it or not, has had 6 fun-filled years on the Rails board, including one as president, but he cannot run again, according to the bylaws. Gwen is up for her second term. We hope that she will.
Yes, I would be happy to
Re-up.
run again.
Jenna, since you were appointed, this is the time for your term to be up for re-election. Dee Reynolds, Dee is not here today. She's actually having, I think, knee replacement surgery.
Oh my gosh.
Her term is also up, and she also cannot run again. She has hit the limit. And Nadia, your term is up, and also hope that you will re-up because it's so much fun to be on the Rails board. And so, we try to get a nominating committee that matches the candidates that we'll be seeking. So Jenna Burr, who's the director of the Fond du Lac Library, and we asked her to be the committee chair. She was also a trustee. She is currently not a trustee, but Jay Caston, you all know, he's going to be on the committee. Mary Jo Matusik, a lot of you also know. She was a former Rails board member, a school librarian.
And president.
And president of the board, yep. And Trimble, director of library services out at Blackhawk College, is our academic librarian representative. So we'll get to work.
Yeah. So, like I said, just a few months. So, for those of you who are eligible to rerun, please think about, you will need to, write a nominating.
Yes, you do need to submit something.
Yes. Dave?
I'm sure the committee will tell us.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Deadline, and so forth.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Congratulations, Dave, on almost completing your 6th year, too. Thank you. All right, so moving right along, we are on to unfinished business. We have a delivery study update for Jeff and Mark.
Yes, and Monica will also be assisting us.
All right.
So Mark, why don't you come up somewhere? Come sit by me, Mark, here.
Unless you're gonna stand over here, but if.
Why don't you? Then everybody can see you better, I think. Have a chair somewhere and scrunch up for a bit. So just to set the scene here, you want a chair? No, you're gonna loom over me? So, delivery is about 30% of our budget. And as you know, it's a hugely important service to every member. And so we've been working on the contents of this for years now, literally, to try to get decades. Just to, as simple as well as straightforward a thing, not simple as getting all of our lease agreements due or, at the same time or month-to-month basis, so if we need to make changes, understanding what the changes are that need to be made, and most importantly, what changes need to be made first so that the other changes make sense. So I'll leave it to you.
Great. I'm going to back up first. I'm going to start off with the facilities document. I thought I would provide this to you guys as well. This is just give you an update on, like Deidre was just saying, on the leases when they expire. What's interesting is there's only 2 buildings that we own, and that's this particular building here and then our Cove Valley property. So that's the information. It's exactly what we spend each month, our averages for the rent, and then utility costs. That's what's on this particular document here. On the second document that's in your package is actually an update, an overview of all of the different studies that we've been doing for the last, seems like 20 years. We've been working on this, and I think we're at a point where we can make some really solid decisions, So this will be just a quick update on that. As far as LASA, and I think at the last meeting when we had a delivery discussion, I know they said, well, LASA's been around for quite some time, and they have. And it's a very important part of our operation. We continue to rely on them to think out of the box. And one of the things that we asked them to do the last time was to actually look at our locations in reference to our members. And they have come back and stated that our locations are in pretty good condition, pretty good locations to actually service our members. So we were very excited about that, primarily because it's a cost savings overall, not to have to move and so forth and so on. So one of the recommendations that they had provided with that was to actually implement what we call routing optimization. Routing optimization is a great product to where it eliminates all of the else boundaries that we're currently restricted under right now. So what that means is the drivers will go out and pick up all of the libraries, any library that's in their territory. That is going to eventually reduce the overall miles, that the disparity in the miles that we're driving now within each one of the hubs. It works out because of the fact that we meet up every night anyway to exchange material, not only between all of the Rails hubs, but also between our sister company, the Heartland Library System, in the south. So it makes perfect sense to implement routing optimization. I'll touch more about that later as we get down, but that's something that I would really like to move forward with, because I think that's going to be a win-win for the operation. We've also been working with Greg Pronovich. Greg Pronovich is a delivery consultant that was hired to actually evaluate the cost effectiveness of bringing back the outsourced deliveries in-house. And he's set up to do 3 different phases for us. Phase 1 was completed, and Greg really doesn't see an overall cost savings to bring back in-house this time. So. As far as, the recommendation, from LASA on routing optimization, and this is where all the moving parts come into play. We've got down here, one of the recommendations was to shift varies from East Peoria to Cove Valley to Rockford, and so forth and so on. What that does is that sort of puts strains on some of the service centers. Our Cove Valley operation is a very small, tiny operation that can't support additional locations. So what we're probably going to have to do is find another location. Find another location that can support the additional locations. Let's say if 50 additional libraries goes to that location, we need to be able to have a facility that can house that, those additional libraries. So that's one of the things that we're going to start looking at, looking for a different property, that can support that. Also, another recommendation that was proposed by LASA was to also utilize the East Peoria as our exchange point between north and south, or between the systems, Rails. And the unfortunate part with that is our East Peoria delivery hub is not sufficient to accept the additional locations, the additional work, and so forth. So we would also need to find a different location to support that operation on a much larger scale. We also have a second property in the East Peoria, and that is where the RSA LSAP is actually housed in. With the increase of additional staffing and other things that they would like to do, we need to do some reconfiguring of the operation. They've got a barrier wall in that operation that is somewhat unique, and it prevents a lot of things. We do have the capacity there to increase, so what we're trying to do at this point is we're meeting with the owners of the building Legacy Properties to discuss the build out of those areas, and then also to talk about some type of credit to where they pick up a percentage of the cost. If the overall cost is $100,000, I'm hoping they would pick up 40% of that cost because they would get future use of that property. So we would want them to share in the wealth here. So those are the some of the moving parts that we've got there. And then the very last section of that is the timeline. The timeline of when we want to make all these happen. So as far as the Coal Valley operation, I think we need to start immediately trying to find a location because once again, everything is waiting for, we can't do anything in that current facility. So for us to implement routing optimization, we need a new facility. Same thing with the, one other thing that I forgot, I apologize. Also speaking with Prairie Cat, because of the fact that if we move out of that building, Prairie Cat is already in that property. We want to start a conversation with Prairie Cat to see if they're interested in over that property. It is a very, very efficient operation to run, so it's not going to cost them a lot of money to maintain that building moving forward. But as far as working with them on that, the timeline is 3 to 6 months. Hopefully that they'll be interested in taking over that property from us. One of the other things in my conversation with the Legacy Properties, the owners of the East Peoria, we're currently on a month-to-month lease with a 60-day out. It's normally not a good thing to do a lot of expenses, a lot of reconfiguring, a lot of payout when month to month, because if they sold the building, I have no contract, I have nothing to stand on. So we want to definitely look at possibly signing a lease, a 2 to 5 year lease, to at least guarantee us some stability, when we start the build outs within there. And I want to start that negotiation within the next months. With that, I already got the initial meeting set up. Well, hopefully it should be set up within the next couple of weeks to where we can meet there in the East Peoria, go over the actual layout, and then hopefully we can then start talking numbers. And I guess the last thing, so the statewide exchange point, want to start that. And that's, like I said, that's also dependent, preferably as soon as possible, where we could actually start researching, investigating different properties and things of that nature. We've got certain criteria we need to meet, size-wise and numbers and things of that nature. So it always takes time to find property, that's going to meet our needs, and we want to do these on a lease basis versus trying to buy something, or build something, which is not where we're going to go. So it always takes time for us to, to find property, so. All right, I'll sit back. Oh, yeah, okay, great. Yes, sir, Dave.
We were talking about outsourcing. It would be cost effective now to bring it back in. Can you give any parameters when it may be cost effective?
Well, part of his investigation is looking at a couple of things. The second and the third was to look at automation. That's one thing, look at additional automation. And then the third thing was to look at, are there other locations that are prime for outsourcing? So we're going to wait and see if what that second half of the investigation uncovers. Because if he comes back, it makes sense to put an automated handler in Bolingbrook, Illinois, and then you bring all of your sorting to that operation, then it may make sense. then it makes sense, but right now, because of the fact that there's just not enough savings, once you get out, it's hard to bring it back because of all the additional costs, that you have to incur. So we're hoping that maybe that looking at consolidating all of our sorting operations would, at that point, maybe there's a possibility at that point.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I'm just curious.
Great. Yes, sir.
When Lassa was here the last time, they were talking about Mount Sterling. Okay. Is that due to route optimization? Has that been eliminated, or is that possibly something?
Yeah, Mount Sterling has moved by the routing optimization, because what's going to happen is we would actually shift libraries. Some may go to Heartland, some may go to Coal Valley, some will go to the other locations to, in essence, create the same effect without increasing our facility numbers. So the exact same thing can happen. We're just tweaking it in a different way.
Great.
So Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts about this. Do you anticipate the challenges of getting the new facilities in Coal Valley, East Peoria, or do you have any idea about that yet?
Oh, no, there's a lot of challenges. Yeah. No, that's a really good question. Like I say, finding property that fits our needs is very, very difficult. It really truly is. Tom and I were talking earlier concerning, different properties and things like that are available in certain areas. So one of the things that we've done last time is we've met with our broker, Chris Keller, and we explain what we need, and we can find something that is comparable. But a lot of times, we have to do build out. We have to reconfigure that property to make it for our needs. Locations where I can drive vehicles into. If I can park vehicles in overnight, that's great. Now I've got other issues with other requirements, from things like that. So it is always challenging when you're trying to find another property, because sometimes it is like a needle, because of the needs that we have. Finding a property that's going to fit us perfectly is very difficult.
Well, so I know it says for Coal Valley immediate, but how long do you think it would take, even if you started right now, before you actually could have a different location?
It is very hard to say, but I would say I would love to do it within 6 months. But then I still have to negotiate the lease. I still have to negotiate build out. I still have so many things that we have to, put into play. So
6 months might be the minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was 6 months could be yeah.
So Margaret, just a quick question. I know there's obvious flexibility to leasing because if situations change, then you can just drop that lease and move somewhere else. But because there is build out at each spot, there is some inefficiency to that. Have we in the Coal Valley area buying a cheap piece of ground and building like a building like we used to have in Shorewood, something that's, it wasn't just a pole barn, but it was a nice pole barn that could be outfitted with everything that we need, and might end up being a similar price tag to finding another property that's not quite right and building it out to serve our needs.
Right. That's a good idea, and that's a thought as well. We haven't looked at that yet. We haven't actually looked at any properties yet, at this point, so that is something that we can definitely take into consideration as well. And that's where working with the broker, he can that and realize that, okay, in this particular market, if you want to stay in this general vicinity, you've got so many percentage points that, so many locations that you to choose from. So these are your options. Either you can try and build to suit, or, you can take, or you have to move out of that particular area, so. Yeah, there's lots of properties in Iowa, but I didn't think people would agree with that too much, so.
Does it have to be in Coal Valley?
No, it doesn't. It could be in Pomona.
Surrounding.
It could be.
Towns around there.
Right. Well, no, it doesn't have to be in Coal Valley.
Okay.
It changes our.
Ideally,
would.
Right, exactly. You know, because what we have to take into consideration, we have to now look and see wherever that property is, am I adding more time onto the routes, you know? Am I gonna have an issue with now restaffing and things, you know? So we want to kind of stay in that area because I think we have a great staff that's there now, you know? If we can't find anything, yes, we will have to move further out. We will expand that, you know, our range, but, you know, within a 50-mile radius or something like that, you know, I would think that, you know, if we have to go further than that, we have to now look at it from a big picture perspective to see how did that change our routing, you know, now. Yeah.
You talked about Prairie Cat maybe buying the property.
Mhm.
Is that likely?
I'm hoping so. You know, the thought of at least, you know, to where it would be over multi-years and things of that nature. It wouldn't be where we would say, I need $500,000 tomorrow. You know, let's sign on the dotted line, you know, let's do a lease to own, you know, gradually get into this, you know. And then there's no large outlay of cash, you know. So the only thing is, let's say if it's in, you know, and then we look at, you know, they have to pick up the utility costs and, you know, the maintenance costs and the, you know, those type of miscellaneous expenses, you know, they would have to make sure that they can absorb those. But overall, I think we wouldn't definitely, you know, hit them with, you know.
It's the things, I mean, the building's been for sale for decades. Well,
Yes, it has.
or way
The
less than
challenge is with the building.
$500,000.
It's beautiful, Prairie
It's a wonderful property.
So Mark, I was reading Prairie Cat's Administrative Council board packet, and I see they're discussed, you know, it sounds like the conversations have started then?
We did have an initial conversation,
Okay.
you know, but we weren't able to fill them out 100% yet. You
We
know,
didn't want
because-
Carolyn's head to explode. If she was watching, happened to be me. It's just something that we felt like we had to throw into the
Sure.
decision
Sure.
pot, because if we're not there at all,
Right.
you know, and if they can acquire an asset,
Yeah.
it would be good for them and it would be good for us.
So as currently just in Coal Valley and Bolingbrook,
Yes,
right?
that's
They
correct.
no longer have staff in Rockford.
No.
Yeah. Interesting.
So these are just all of the options. Obviously, we're starting to more intensively and, you know, really things. Obviously, we won't make any decisions without talking to you guys, but we just wanted you to understand kind of the relationships and,
Oh, yeah.
so it's been an interesting year working on all these.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts.
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah.
Yes, pleasure.
It's a tremendous thing to manage, and we appreciate you taking the time to do it so detailed and so strategically.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
Any questions for Mark?
Nadia?
Did,
Nope.
she might be off camera.
Oh,
now.
were you putting in Greg?
Okay, she said no
No,
questions.
she's there. We heard Nadia. Thank you, Nadia.
I have one question.
Oh, no.
How long has the Coal Valley been on?
Since 2011,
Oh, wow. Okay.
off and on. I mean, we took it off for a while, maybe 2012. I mean, right immediately,
Right,
I would
right.
say. And then it didn't sell, and so we took it off for a while, and then it was on.
Change
Is it
brokers.
officially off?
It's
Okay.
I remember it was annexed into the city
Yes.
/ village of Coal Valley, which we thought might be make it a slightly more attractive property. And Prairie Cat is a great property. It needed any improvement. Yeah.
You know, they're actually in it right now.
I know they
I
are.
know.
Yes, I'm
I know.
very familiar with that building.
I-
No, that was great, Mark. Thank you. That was good.
Thank you so
That was
much.
good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, we are actually, I see Greg is in Springfield and he's had a moment to take his coat off. So, Greg, would you give the Illinois State Library report?
I
I'm fine with that. I think my tie is straightened again too, so. Good afternoon from the staff here at the State Library and Secretary White. It's always good to join these meetings when we get the opportunity. And we could today, even though it's a bit delayed, and I thank Joe for being here in my place up until this. So a few items, and some I'm sure of more interest than others, but right now, the State Library is engaged in reviewing the public library per capita grant applications for FY20, the public library grant applications also for FY20, and beginning review or in the initial stages of the FY21 literacy and Project Next Generation applications for grants to libraries and literacy programs. And we're also have begun our work on the system area grant application that will be forwarded to the library systems in the coming weeks. There's not a lot of significant change there, but we are going to have to do some modification based upon what we have learned a bit more with the activity that we've gone through. So that it should not be a significant change at all, but there will be some modification to that. So I do want each of the library systems, or especially Rails and Heartland, to be aware of that because it will impact them the most. So also begun looking, and this is something that Dee spoke about at the Illinois Library Association conference last fall, begun our work on looking at the public library per capita grant application for FY21. Results of serving our public 4.0, the standards for public libraries being released by the Library Association. So we have begun that work. I think we will be going into our third review now of what that might look like. And we do hope to have that out to public libraries later this year than in years past. Of course, what occurred this week and what is on many, many people's minds was the budget address occurred by the governor for FY21. The budget book does acknowledge the Secretary's of State's appropriation request for an increase in public library per capita and school library per capita grant programs in FY21. The Illinois Library Association had established what they had requested some priorities for funding. That particular piece to be the number one priority. And we are hopeful that still hopeful that when the Secretary's budget is formally introduced into the General Assembly, that budget will reflect that certainly, and of course we are a long way from seeing the results of that. So the intent would be that the public library per capita would go up to as much as $1.47.5 per resident served, and the school library grant program would be raised from 75 cents per student to 88.5 cents per student. So we shall see how that plays out in the coming months through the legislative process. I don't any pieces yet. Sure.
So can you just clarify what is included in the public, where's the area and per capita grant? Is that in there somewhere?
The system area per capita grant is in a similar approach, is in the station line, but the funding is targeted specifically to public library per capita and school library per capita.
Got it, okay.
What is reflected in the budget book, and it's a bit difficult to see too, because of the complexity of the state's budget, and this budget, there's two funding sources for public library per capita and school libraries and the library systems, from the general fund and the Live and Learn fund. And so the increase is in the general fund, or would be in the general fund, I should say.
Thank you.
Sure. Questions?
Anyone have any questions for Greg?
Well, it's really good news.
It is really,
Yes, it
yes,
is.
yes, it is, so.
The last time it was increased was 25 years ago.
Thank you, Greg. No, that was a report well worth waiting for.
So, and, you know, it's still, you know, we're all very cautious about this. It still has to go through the legislative process, so. It's out there, so. Okay.
And the purpose of advocacy is, of course, to influence the legislative process. So that's very important.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
And thank you, Joe. We will now go back to 9.2 Strategic Plan Progress Report, and Deirdre will be discussing goal number 1.
Yes. As I promised and warned you at the last meeting, so you know, amazingly enough is, you know, still quite long, even though it's only one of the goals. But it is, because it's about resource sharing specifically, obviously it is one of the most, if not the most important goal in the strategic plan. So just to give you some, you know, specific examples that you know when you hear about, you just heard a big report on delivery, you know, which is obviously a big part of resource sharing, but just some more specifics about not just materials, but also how we, you know, work to encourage the sharing of materials and expertise, which also tax dollars go further and improve services from that libraries of all types can provide to their communities. For example, a big example of that is, of course, the census, which we're working on right now. Something we thought of as a project when we developed this plan, but you have to be able to be opportunistic. So where Amy is doing a great job, we got $750,000 from the Illinois Department of Human Services, and we have about 26 in color counties, libraries, and mostly, but also some county offices that are working to get a complete count. And I went to her weekly Zoom meeting yesterday, and it was that she has with the subrecipients, and it was a perfect thing. They were sharing information about what kinds of promotional materials they're buying and where they're getting them from, and talking about, you know, going in together on purchasing to get better prices. I mean, it was exactly the kind of thing that our libraries are so good at. That's it. On a related note, IDHS has asked us if we want more money. So we're not sure. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, we want to be able to help more libraries. I think this would enable us to push some of our efforts out, which would be great. They have recognized and said to us that Rails is in a pretty unique position because we do have this big network of libraries. Thank you very much, Joe Natale, for that information you got us. It helped us to put together an ask. We've done well, they said we could ask for 5%, and so that's $37,500. And then they said, "Wouldn't you like some more?" So we've asked for more. And so I feel like it's a compliment, and it's good for libraries too. So, Explore More is another, I think, innovative example of resource sharing. We bought this platform, platform for museum or, you know, cultural past attractions, and we've got now more than just hundreds of libraries participating in this. I don't remember. Yeah, that's growing all the time, And the Heartland is also going to join it. So it's really, I think we paid about $25,000 for this, and it's getting huge use throughout the state. So that's really exciting. We were, a couple of years ago, we're going to continue to provide financial support to all of the consortia in Rails that are providing the shared catalogs services. That we give support of about $2.5 million a year for that. We know that that is instrumental in helping them do some innovative projects or keep member fees lower, and again, direct more services to the residents. You heard about delivery. I did want you to see on page, I think it's the third page of my report, you'll see at the top there, couple of examples of Milledgeville Public Library joined Rock River Public Library, Astoria Public Library, and we have more libraries that we think are going to be coming in this year too, so that's really great. I told you already about Baker and Taylor, that we're looking at that in terms of e-read on page 4, and making sure that that is the best use of tax dollars. We've worked on pushing back against the publisher restrictions on access to ebooks for libraries, and thanks to all of you who signed the ebooks for all petition, etc. At the bottom of page 6, providing greater purchasing power so that, through doing cooperative purchasing, that's really become very active, much more active in the past year or so, thanks to Layla Heath, our new staffer. She's just gung-ho on that, and she's always finding new, she takes no prisoners when it comes to negotiating, so it's really great, I think, what she's managing to achieve.
In that light,
Yep.
Do you happen to know the specifics of the Swank movie deal? I know that's
it's very complex. I know that. Are you already a customer? Okay. So they wanted, and tell me if I say this wrong, Monica, or maybe you could say it, but expecting us to increase it by a certain number beyond who was already in it.
Sure.
But the people who were already in it were going to get a discount? Am I close to being right about that?
There was a number that they wanted us to hit in order to get that. That was a very large number that we are very far from hitting.
Right.
So the original determination is not currently in play, but we are, as we're optimistic about growth, just not to the level that they, maybe
like
at
100 libraries or some
right.
crazy number. So I'll have Layla reach out to you because she knows the specifics.
Okay, cool.
Sorry that I don't.
That's all right.
Yeah, so you can see on page 7, there's all these, what she's working on. You already heard about, you heard from Dan about all the great member engagement, resource sharing, what's going on. And, Joe works with these networking groups as well in terms of, we provide some, CE grants for them. So anyway, just to give you more of a flavor of the specific resource sharing that are not related to delivery specifically. So, any questions?
Any questions for Deirdre? Thorough report as usual, ma'am.
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, development, and we have a guest speaker. Deirdre, would you like to introduce our speaker?
I would. So Miguel Figueroa, speaking of sharing expertise, Miguel came to a board meeting a while ago when you first started your gig, I think. Miguel is the director of the Center for libraries, and I believed then and still believe that it's probably the best thing that ALA has done in my lifetime and I a lot about ALA. So I look at your stuff all the time, and so I'm so glad that you're here to tell us more about the trends work that you're doing, or just anything that you want to tell us that will be thought-provoking and helpful to our board of trustees and librarians.
Cool.
Thank you, Miguel.
Sure, thank you. All right, let's see if this is working. What are y'all seeing? Oh, no. Let me stop this sharing and try and get rid of this. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to struggle with sharing this. Maybe? Oh, there you go. Okay, now we're all set. Okay. So thank you all so much for having me here. I know some of you have probably heard my spiel before, but I a little bit relevant to the conversations that you all are having at the board. I'm going to trust on Deidre or Monica or Emily or even Jenna to give me the nudge when my time is up. So, what's this future and foresight thinking? In case you haven't seen my presentations, but recap. What we're trying to do at ALA with this initiative is try and encourage libraries to look beyond what's happening in the immediate library environment. And so the tools of futurists and foresight professionals say that we need to look and intentionally study change. We know that many really great libraries already do much of their innovation and progress. This is just trying to make it easier in a lot of ways to do that type of change study at scale. I usually remind people this is from Marsha Lynn Ray, but she says that foresight is thinking ahead to how trends, issues, and developments that can be observed in the present shape alternatives. There's three kind of things that you need to do. Start to ask yourself, what are the key forces that are shaping the future? Think about what might be their possible outcomes. So in addition to identifying, oh, this is new and this is new and this is new, to actually start talking with yourself and colleagues about, well, how would the world look different if these things started? And then that ultimately leads to important progress, which is asking yourselves, okay, what's the learning and the actions that we have to undergo right now to help prepare us for those possible futures? I usually distill this down into three kind of steps that need to happen: collecting information, making connections, and then. So I want to walk those three, I guess, both in terms of what's available as tools for collecting information, some of the connections that I'm starting to see and that are raising concerns, and then the opportunities for groups like Rails to start to prioritize this type of thinking and make it more relevant to the memberships that you're working with. In saving the time of the user, that was the one message in library school that really stuck with me. And so oftentimes I know that when we do strategic plans and other things, we put the burden on ourselves to do those environmental scans. I'm a real big believer in letting others do the work for you. So I do letters and other types of things. My own newsletter called Read for Later that's available at that tiny letter link. And I'll send the PDF out afterwards as well through Deidre and Emily. But also, I mean, there's lots of great organizations that are pushing a lot of really targeted pieces of information that are relevant to specific areas. Big fan of things like Education Dive, Retail Dive, and Smart Cities Dive. They're basically consultants and others who are looking at specific sectors and areas. So Education Dive distills broad trends that are happening across K-12, but also into higher education. You get a great newsletter once a way to scan through and ask yourself, do I know about these things? Are they new or are they different? I read Next Draft. Y-Pulse is great for our teen and youth services people. It's all about millennials, I guess, teens, new adults, those types of categories. And even something like the Non-Obvious Insights newsletter gives you a great target of things that we're starting to see. So that process of collecting information both at the organizational, environmental, and also at the global level. Those pieces of information only have relevance then if you start to make the connections across the individual changes and ask yourself, well, what's the big things that are happening? So these are the things that I've been thinking of, that I'm hoping to go through. I think we're in a period right now where access is becoming really easy. And this is a great thing in a lot of ways for a lot of what libraries do and think about, because we are all about access. We talked about organizing information, but we organize information to make access easier. I think right now we're seeing a lot of people that point to this idea that much easier for people to collect things from. So we started to see things like UPS and Amazon introduce these smart lockers distributed across communities. We're starting to see more and more libraries get into that game as well, whether they're using the smart lockers in their library lobbies, maybe adjacent to their further out into the community. In areas with wide geographic distribution, we're starting to see the use of library smart lockers at grocery stores or at the post office or something like that. I pulled this from the Hinsdale Public Library. You know, they're getting into the subscription box game where they actually sign paid books and materials by subscription. People sign up ahead of time. The library staff prepare these boxes curated with reads and books and other things for them, and they make them available for pickup at the library. And beyond Hinsdale and some other libraries here in Illinois, we're starting to see libraries across the country start to look at this model. Really become back in a lot of ways. Anaheim Public Library, they've made their vending machine available at the airport, complete with a book drop so people can take things coming and going. And then probably last year we saw information about this new book bot that the Mountain View Public Library started to use. They're really well positioned because Google has an experimental laboratory that basically tries to toy with different ideas. They're trying to play catch up with some of the other wheeled delivery services that are starting to happen in communities. And so they turn to the City of Mountain View and Mountain View's library to deploy this little bot across the community to actually retrieve materials and return them back to the library. The little guy only ran for about 12 days. Only when the weather was really nice. But it was a great experiment and kind of pointed towards possible futures. I was really heartened to see Mark's discussion about delivery of materials, because I think that's going to a lot of these trends both for our users and for libraries. Unfortunately, I think last year I talked to 2 library systems that had really run into problems because they had not thought early enough about the future of their delivery services. And it's a really big problem because most of our communities are becoming more accustomed to deliver to them very easily. So trying to think through, well, how do these trends fit into a larger system for Rails to think about, well, what's going to be the future of book delivery and exchange and other types of things, and how do things come together? One thing that was left off might be self-driving cars, which I know we're still that far off. Nuro has a different grocery delivery, grocery stores to do neighborhood delivery, not directly to doors, but rather into the neighborhood, wherein then the patrons would come and retrieve items from a sort of van whose sides pop up and there's little shelves and other types. We're planning for the future of things that we understand and know, to think about, well, what's the future of these other trends that are moving towards things? The idea of co-location, I think, is becoming more and more important for libraries. During lunch, I know we were hearing about passport services and notary services and other types of things. And I think libraries start to think about how they co-locate services together in their buildings. Things like College Depot at the Phoenix Public Library that brings in college preparation services and scholarship search services. The introduction of social workers at the library. In the lower left-hand corner is an example of the Matchbox co-working space to the Lafayette, Indiana. It's a great use of very closely aligned services to target different markets of that particular community. And of course, Chicago Public Library's 3 new branches that work with other city agencies, specifically the Housing Authority, to introduce different models of service. Starting for many of our systems, both in relationship to their other city agencies or even nonprofits or other types of things. And how might that also start to affect things like the benefits that Rails provides to libraries? Might they have a similar and extending benefit to some of the other agencies, departments, or partners? Digital content, I think we all know, is going more and more exclusive. Most of us are probably aware of what's happening with ebooks, but of course there's growing concern about lots of other categories of information. Things like what's happening with Netflix and Amazon and whether they will continue to make it available to libraries. For the most part, I think Netflix, when it first introduced some of their original scripted series, they made them available on DVD at some point after original airing. They started to rein that back in. Roma is still not available, I don't think. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I think, has seen an extended concern might be that we're starting to see documentary streaming content that's much more informational, current events focused, things like Patriot Act, and none of that content will ever become part of the sort of more shareable system that libraries are much more used to. And even the introduction of things like Luminas platform, podcasts available, but also makes exclusive podcasts available for subscribers. And while it may sound like $6 a month isn't that much, $6 is $6. It's a lot of money for different communities, especially around a format of content that was built on the concept of board. Much of our library advocacy has been focused on trying to push back against some of this exclusionary practice. I think there's also a growing system and stream in libraries that's saying, what if instead of fighting with the publishers, we ourselves became publishers? You know, we started to see things like New York Public Library worked with Mother Advertising Firm to introduce these Insta novels that sort of repurposed public domain content. They animated them with illustrations and then made them available on Instagram Stories platforms so that people could individually scroll through the novel as they go. We're starting to see things like Stacks Pittsburgh, where they work with their community's musicians to create a platform wherein those musicians can make recordings available through the library's catalog and platform. They're available to card members of the Carnegie Library and might also be available to other libraries that use the Rabble music catalog and other things. You all were one of the original people driving some of this with the Soon to Be Famous project and other types of things, but starting to think, well, how do we scale some of these initiatives so that libraries have greater control from the start over the content that we want to share, or thinking about how we get content that has a nice finish. I saw the genealogy book that I think you had. You know, there's a lot of interest in genealogy and local history and starting to think about that. I often think about the Rails podcast, you know, trying to figure out, could we invest in community-based podcasting or some other sort of digital collections that can be relevant stories about local libraries. This one's kind of a little weird, I guess. I think there's a growing trend of free for purpose. We're starting to see more and more for-profit, or what used to be, for-profit services try to market a slice of what they're offering as free and layer on this sense of we're giving it away for free because of certain values. So Lyft introduced this Lyft Up ride access program that is slowly built, and the original vision was that they would provide discounted rides for people to access food and groceries, especially in food deserts or food swamps. They worked with different food banks and other food-based nonprofits to try and make those free rides available. They've since scaled up and done job access programs where they're pursuing an employment agency or an interview or something else. They're introducing voting access again, including for individuals to get rides to their primary elections during this election season. And in disasters and other responses, they're doing this. Most of it is clouded around even supporting communities. On the other side also has their Airbnb open homes program that really focuses on disaster relief areas, housing both people displaced by disasters and also responders from Red Cross or other types of organizations coming into those communities. Kansas City recently announced to make public transportation free. They believe transportation is a right that should be made equitable across communities, and it should not be an additional burden, even at $2 a fare or whatever it might be, that they should just eliminate those fares. And Amazon's new headquarters, homeless shelter, again, they're trying to add this sort of nice veneer to the business practices that they offer. The reason that I think this is kind of still fuzzy for us is that for libraries, I think we have a very strong brand that says we're free. I think this might be pushing us to better articulate what is the actual services. And for many libraries, where library staff were able to say that, well, it's because we believe information should be equitable and accessible. We believe that it encourages workforce development, economic development, and other types of things. But we might choose to hone in on some of the value of services, that it's really driving specific values in a community and helps address community-wide goals. We're starting to see a big push where learning is getting lonelier in this world. I think some of us are online high school programs. It's really great benefit for certain members of our communities, and certainly been a great thing for libraries to offer. There's a couple of weird elements that are starting to happen as well. In the upper image, that young girl at her laptop with her headphones on is an actual marketing image from Waterford's Up program. So this is the what the future of preschool might look like. And they've increasingly started to work with state governments to make these programs available across their states for free, tax supported, to help increase access to early childhood education. From an access for people who might be might not be enough volume to bring together a preschool program or something else. But it's also kind of concerning because this isn't the best form of education, especially for young people to undergo. It doesn't encourage some of those socialization aspects and other things. And then the equal access to full day preschool for them to re-enter the workforce. And if that's not made available and instead states and governments make this option available, it doesn't free some of those adults to go back into the workforce and support their families in the way they might need. At the other end of the spectrum, I think we're starting to see more and more big university programs around tuition. So most of us are probably familiar with Southern New Hampshire University, University of Phoenix, which have strong traditions of these sort of online programs. Arizona State University is really starting to look at how they will grow their online student enrollment and other business tuition and fees. One of the interesting things is that I think many of these online programs are starting to recognize the limits that they have, that form of education, while it may be more accessible, doesn't necessarily translate into long-term retention and completion and other rates of success. And so they're trying to create in-person connection in communities across their distributed networks. Some of them even start talking about, like, we want to find community-based organizations that have technology and free internet. And I'm like, it's libraries, but they haven't quite figured it out. We're going to start to see libraries, I think, are responding with things like learning circles, where they bring online learners together to kind of digest and process some of the online courses that they're gathering together and give them a space to kind of ground themselves in socialized learning. And of course, the shift look at active type of learning, like what's happening around yoga programs and other things. I was really interested to hear about the L2R project that Anne kind of updated us on. I know that that's internal looking, it's looking more at staff development. But Intercept, which the vendor was also to make programming a more central focus for attendees. They were really trying to say, well, how can attendees register for their programs ahead of time, receive regular updates, check into their sessions, and other types of things. And I think it shows how libraries are shifting some of their ideas away to really start in-person engagement. So trying to think about how might L2R also lead this collaborative and its member libraries in that direction might be an interesting way to think. And I think we're also starting to see this space is becoming experienced, talking about space person engagement. Most of our colleagues in retail, restaurant, hotels are trying to reconfigure their spaces to focus on people-based experiences, all the things you can learn in that space, who you can meet in that space, how you can have a great time. The actually rendering Washington, D.C. location. If you hadn't heard, they basically leased back from the city of DC the original Carnegie Public Library that was the base of the DC Public Library system. They renovated it, which was much needed. But the interesting thing is that they've marketed that space on their Carnegie Library. New type of library, much more focused on classes, lectures, musical performances. Oprah's relaunched book club had the first meeting at the DC Carnegie, or the Apple Carnegie Public Library. And so that might be an indicator of the directions that people for regular libraries. Starting to see the activation of once quiet sort of public spaces. That's Howler and Yoon's Swing Time installation in Boston that took public green space and installed these large-scale swings, really focused on changing people's behavior. So people would go down and swing space, shifting color, space, and then at some point they just kind of wiped them all away. But they had changed the behaviors of people in those neighborhoods to make them more accustomed to that. I think for libraries, we're starting to see a couple of things. Do Space in Omaha, I know it's several years old at this point, but really still an innovative idea, tech hub that kind of serves some of the similar functions of what libraries do. It was developed with the library as a partner, but really much more focused on the specific needs of technology. And even things like these story walks and other types of things that are moving outside of the traditional walls of a non-library spaces. This one takes readers down a path to read the story as they go walking along a green space or park. And then the last one, I think we're starting to see a new wave of worker activism that's really interesting and perhaps might be concerning. Especially really big over the past year. Google experienced a large-scale walkout of many of their employees, initially concerned about some of their dealings with senior management around the Time's Up concern and activism, and so they raised within the company about Google's involvement in different government contracts, working with ICE or the Defense Department or something else. And similarly, Amazon had worker demonstrations around their involvement in the environment, the impact that Amazon has on and their other areas. And they started to raise some changes that are starting to happen. I think it starts to trickle into libraries where I think some of the traditional policies that libraries have in place can spark controversy, especially in this highly. So I keep watching what happened with Toronto Public Library, where their meeting spaces were being booked by different organizations that had highly politicized views. So in Seattle and Toronto, it was around a feminist group that had anti-trans messaging built in. Seattle and Toronto also saw many of their own employees raise concerns about the guidance that managers and administrations are leveling. I won't exempt ALA from this either, so I did put in a picture of the ALA exhibit hall because I think over the past 2 years, a lot of concerns, this square protest space on the exhibit floor is a sort of way to give people a platform to raise concerns. But that in many ways, I think many of our members raised concerns that it was limiting free speech and the other purposes. And it's hard when a lot of those concerns, but more and more I think it's going to be that sort of internal critique that might also be very difficult. And it's hard when we're trying to create policies that are open to the public, but that also try to adhere to a changing and sometimes strained diversity. A lot of those, while admirable individually, conflict with each other in some of their nuances and subtleties. So trying to think about how that might happen, especially, you know, Rails is covering a lot of political ground, frankly. I mean, so different lenses thing to think about in the long term, especially if we continue in this politicized environment that we're in. Ways to prioritize. So I was trying to think, you know, what we want to see is people taking these trends and changes, filtering them through the values and goals to really chase after every one of these trends and changes. Instead, it's an opportunity to say, okay, which of these are the most important? Which should we invest time and effort in? The opportunities that I started to think about, especially for a group like this that can achieve your broad under the umbrella. The networking groups and online roundtables, I'm sorry to assign work to Dan. That's not my intention. But I mean, I'm really impressed by the variety of groups that are involved. There would be an opportunity trend-based innovation, other things together so that they would have space to talk about these things, a more regular channel to collect their information. Karen Keefe at Hinsdale has done a really good job with her Foresight group across Chicago. They've had some really good practice around trend-based discussion and futuring exercises. So that might be an opportunity to take some of this information and really make it applicable to the libraries that you serve. Thinking beyond desk research, a lot of the trend scanning focuses on things like other types of things. But you also have the opportunity, especially around some of the groups that you have, to get people out of their libraries and go to other events, training events, other environments, visit other industries, sectors, other things. You know, your work with the special libraries group took us to the library business starting to do, John Deere or whoever it may have been. So trying to think about that. I'm a big fan of the Pulse, the library Pulse entries that about the census and other things. So again, if this sort of builds, would there be distilling it down, making it applicable to this particular geography, and pushing that out to the membership so they can have really well digested information that's relevant to what's happening in the state of Illinois in their specific communities. I always think that's a really great service. Is to start to think about these trends in terms of impact or likelihood. So I often tell people, you know, as you're doing trend scanning, part of what you're doing is pulling out specific statements from some of the things that you read. And then as you go into a strategic plan or other area, you have things will have an impact and whether they will be likely. So if you developed a sort of group that was responsible for trend scanning, then could you annually or every other year issue a sort of survey across the membership and ask people, well, do we think, you know, virtual reader will have congestion in downtown areas, yes or no? And that might help Rails start to think about where they might invest certain energy or effort or align budget to start to address some of these issues that more and more of your membership think have a bigger idea around. Them falls in different areas. Self-driving cars, yeah, they might have a high impact, but they have a low likelihood at this point. So maybe it's not worth building that into your delivery services plan. But there might be other areas where our membership thinks, oh, well, they're and of course, you can also start doing things like futures wheels, where you start to understand the correlation of different changes and shifts and realize both the near-term and longer-term effects of some of those changes, whether it's on Rails as a system or individual libraries in the with.
Go, David.
Question, yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm a public library trustee. And one of the things I'm taking away from this talk, I've known before, is the importance for public libraries to hire any public library, because we're all volunteers. We come from a variety of different life experiences and occupations. And some of this, and actually to a director or other librarians with this thing, because actually as a trustee, my main concern is money.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going to get the money to do all this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to consider ourselves with operations and with the building. We have to keep the maintenance up in the building. It all takes all the time. A particular community saying, this might be a good idea. So thank you very much.
Well, I mean, I think you're highlighting this is all of those little dots and all the changes, they do take money. But I think where we really need library staff fundamentals of what a library is supposed to do. And then they can start to work with the trustees and ask, we've seen that these are the 3 priorities we should really work across. Are they worth the investment to make them execute? Because we've all known that there have been libraries that invested in attachment to what their particular library and community is needed for. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's also one of the great things that Rails could do is, I mean, you all can kind of serve as that filter to say, yeah.
Awesome, Miguel.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Board members, any news you'd like to share about what's going on at your library?
Actually, this is what's going on so much at our library. First of all, I attended the legislative luncheon for the West Suburban Libraries earlier this month. And for $180,000 over 10 years. I think that was from the state, I'm not exactly sure. But that's a lot of money. And it's the importance of doing the census project. The second thing I want to bring up at this time, first of all, I enjoyed that video at the beginning.
It's certainly out there on Twitter. What do you think? I mean,
Sure, all of the entire
Mr.
state of
Social
Illinois?
Media?
Yeah.
Yeah, let us look into it.
Because I think that'd be in the corporate world today, and how bad that is. But that's a whole different topic. Thank you.
You know, Dave, can I just say something? So we actually produced, and Mary was a big part of this, produced a 25 ways that you can use that video for effective that video to their own representatives rather than Rails, because, you know, there are so many different representatives.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Because I would send it out
Yeah.
to my.
When they already know you and have a
Right, it's
relationship.
much better
with them in
coming
a lot
from
of
you for
cases.
obvious
I think
reasons.
that's a great idea.
Scott? Looks like you.
So March 14th is our annual STEM Fest event at our Romeyville Library, and it's one of our big events. We had just a hair under 1,000 people show up last year. And yeah, who knows, but the response is huge, and we think we're going to go over 1,000 this year. So it's.
You're like party planner extraordinaire.
We do like our big events. It's a 6-hour-long.
Super.
So at the UIC library, we had the grand opening of our Digital Humanities Hub, which is a little bit like in the public library, you have the makers, but it also how you could apply digital technology to sort of humanities and other research and information. So you might have this is an example, like a digital map of like a geographic document and click on the different locations, and then it would take you to all these different documents or historical facts or photos or things like that. So now we have more resources for especially people. And then we also have things like 3D printer and a large-scale plotter and stuff like that. Also yesterday at our library, Governor Pritzker was there having a press conference with our chancellor, and the president of the University was exciting to have TV cameras and everything like that. So that was a fun event, and then hopefully the more support for higher education will end up happening, so that will be good for all of us. For sure.
we are able to get the Boy Scouts their merit badge in 6 hours, and it is a packed 6 hours. So we have more volunteers involved than we limit the number of scouts. We also, something that's kind of exciting for us, and I think it really promotes how well librarians work with other departments, how we office and are now doing the website design for about 5 other departments.
Great.
And doing promotional materials and doing editing of public forward-facing documents for about 5 or 6 other departments now. So pretty exciting.
I'd like to talk about what Dave talked about, the legislative thing to, Monica and I were over in Galesburg, and I was sitting at a table that had a bunch of college librarians. So they're definitely going to do that. So.
Any other reports?
Just have some from ILA. The ILA February and March 14th at the Oprah Marriott. So any
Great.
trustees who wants to come out and learn a couple of things like how to run a board and all that good stuff. In spring.
If there are no other reports, we are on to agenda building for the next Rails board meeting. As a special reminder, we will be at Gwen's home. Well, not our home, but unless Gwen is graciously arranged for a tour for us starting at 11:30 a.m. and lunch will be at noon. A couple important notes: parking is available at a paid garage, but it's a little bit of a walk to the meeting room, so you should allow time for that for community, and we can email out the details.
No, we had a site visit. Emily and Wes were there testing out the technology, so that should be all good. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that this during spring break. Be as jam-packed with tons and tons of people, so you won't get to see that.
We'll have to go back during exam study
Right.
time. Literally standing room only, yeah.
Thank you, Gwen. It's time to start talking about Deirdre Brennan's evaluation process, because again, it's that time of the that time of the year, and everyone's favorite time of the year. We'll be receiving our statements of economic interest notice from Cook County, so I know that's something we all look forward to. Sounding like no? Well, all right, folks, this has been a great meeting and one of our longer ones. So I am going to declare this meeting adjourned at 3:18 p.m.